Something massive has entered the Mediterranean, and the Revolutionary Guards are now in full panic mode. On May 11th, the diplomatic table between the US and Iran completely collapsed. The IRGC, thinking it had found its opportunity, attempted to threaten the US naval forces in the region. They activated their air defense systems. They deployed their mini-submarines in ready-to-fire position against the US Navy. They pulled their commanders into underground bunkers. But Washington delivered its answer not with words, but with a massive nuclear submarine parked at the mouth of the Mediterranean. On May 11th, the Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine USS Alaska surfaced in front of civilian cameras and conducted a port visit in Gibraltar. And this surprise move by the US is evolving the war in the Hormuz equation into an entirely different dimension, because the timing is no coincidence. The day the submarine reached Gibraltar, President Trump had characterized Iran's negotiation proposal as totally unacceptable. The moment diplomatic channels blocked, a nuclear-capable platform appeared at the mouth of the Mediterranean. No threatening statement was made. No press conference was held. It was simply parked there, for everyone to see. In strategic deterrence, this is called the silent intimidation doctrine. You don't tell the other side what will be done. You simply show what can be done. You leave the rest to their imagination. And this tactic touches the Revolutionary Guard's most vulnerable point: uncertainty. Analyzing the firepower carried by this submarine is of great importance to grasp the severity of the matter. The vessel has the capacity to carry up to 20 Trident nuclear missiles, forming the sea leg of America's nuclear triad. Public port visits by strategic assets of this caliber during moments when diplomacy is blocked are extremely rare. A nuclear-capable platform positioning itself relatively close to hot conflict zones signals that a new step has been taken on the escalation ladder. It appears that the Washington administration is planning to upset the calculations on the ground by casting the shadow of an unfired nuclear warhead into its adversary's mind. Of course, the submarine is not a message on its own. It is merely the heaviest instrument of a much larger military orchestra. The massive shadow beneath the waters was the direct result of a great collapse echoing at the negotiation table. Currently, 41% of all US Navy ships actively deployed worldwide are positioned in and around the Strait of Hormuz. According to Stars and Stripes analysis, more than 27 American warships are in the region, 2 carrier strike groups, more than 10 destroyers, 2 marine amphibious assault ships, 3 littoral combat ships, and hundreds of combat aircraft. More than 16,000 sailors and marines. The largest American naval force concentration seen in a single region since World War II. USS Abraham Lincoln is conducting Operation Epic Fury in the Arabian Sea, with F-35Cs on its deck. USS George H.W. Bush is operating alongside it, with 25 F/A-18 Super Hornets. 2 aircraft carriers in the same waters simultaneously for the first time since the conflict began. According to CENTCOM's own statement, forces have so far forced 61 commercial vessels to turn back and disabled 4. And now, on top of this massive force, a nuclear-armed submarine is being added to the mouth of the Mediterranean. The French aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle has passed through Suez and is advancing through the Red Sea toward the Gulf. Britain is sending a destroyer. On Tuesday, multinational defense ministers will discuss plans to reopen Hormuz. Strategic bridges are being built one by one, and each one tightens the circle around Iran a little more. Of course, the IRGC is watching all of this, and its response may tell everything. What is particularly striking is this: none of these forces have yet opened fire. No new operation has been launched. But all these platforms deployed to the same region at the same time within the same week. In military terminology, this is called force buildup, and it is generally either the harbinger of a major operation or a psychological blockade tool aimed at breaking the opposing side's will. The Revolutionary Guards know both possibilities, and that is precisely why they are in panic. At this point, we need to look at the other side of the stage, because Tehran's response to this pressure reveals the anatomy of desperation. In response to this asymmetric nuclear message delivered by the US via the Mediterranean, Iran decided to activate its own strategic playing field, the Strait of Hormuz. Commander of Iran's Army and Navy forces, Rear Admiral Shahram Irani, announced that domestically produced light submarines called Persian Gulf Dolphins have been deployed on high alert in the Strait of Hormuz. He declared that these platforms are ready to fire, can remain motionless on the seabed for extended periods to monitor enemy vessels, and can engage in combat if necessary. On paper, this statement may appear to be a formidable threat. It is believed that Iran could possess thousands of such submarines, and this could inflict serious damage on the US Navy. However, from a military realist perspective, comparing the Ghadir fleet to an Ohio-class submarine, or the US Navy's massive destroyers, is no different from comparing a rowboat to an ocean-going vessel. But while the world's eyes are locked on the waters of the Mediterranean and the Strait of Hormuz, this massive naval standoff is just the tip of the iceberg. Naval power is only half the story. The truly alarming developments are taking place in the air. B-2 Spirit stealth bombers are being reloaded with munitions at Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. Each can carry two 14-ton GBU-57s in its internal bays, the world's largest conventional bomb, a monster capable of penetrating 60 meters deep. These bombs were designed to strike Iran's deep underground nuclear facilities and missile cities, and stockpiles have dropped to critical levels. The U.S. Air Force awarded Boeing a $62.55 million emergency replenishment contract. New bombs are being produced. B-1B Lancers are being reloaded with GBU-72s at bases in the region, the new generation 5,000-pound bunker-busting bombs that have never seen combat, as we previously analyzed. These bombs have collapsed Iran's coastal tunnels, and more are on the way. B-52 Stratofortresses continue to erode Iran's logistical infrastructure with cruise missiles and conventional munitions. And an analysis by the Hudson Institute highlights a critical shift in the operation. The U.S. has now shifted from expensive Tomahawk cruise missiles to cheaper JDAMS, GPS-guided precision bombs. What does this mean? Iran's air defense has collapsed to such an extent that U.S. aircraft no longer need to launch expensive missiles from a safe distance. They can now comfortably close in and drop cheap bombs. At the start of the war, a single Tomahawk cost $2 million. Now, a JDAM costing just a few $1,000s does the same job. This dramatically increases the US's ammunition depth, meaning it can sustain the war for much longer. F-15E Strike Eagles at Muwafaq Salti in Jordan, transferred from RAF Lakenheath in the UK, are being rearmed. 12 F-22 Raptors at Ovda Air Base in Israel, the first offensive weapon deployed to Israel in US history, continue to provide an air superiority umbrella. 14 tanker aircraft at Ben Gurion provide the range for US warplanes to reach Iran. And at Al Udeid in Qatar, RAF Eurofighter Typhoons, a rare Allied contribution, are deployed. The logic of the second phase is very clear. The goal is no longer to strike existing weapons, but to destroy the capacity to reproduce them. Missile factories, drone production facilities, component supply chains, the IRGC logistics network, all are targets. Israel has struck over 100 regime production facilities in the last 24 hours. Weapons transport aircraft belonging to the IRGC's Quds Force at Tehran's Merabat Airport have been destroyed. Satellite imagery shows 17 damaged aircraft. 10 of Iran's 18 air bases have been struck. Runways are cratered, and hardened shelters have collapsed. Despite all this destruction, Iran has not surrendered and is still fighting. And the asymmetric capabilities at its disposal are truly challenging the US. The biggest problem? Underground. Iran's Imad cities, massive tunnel systems dug hundreds of meters deep into the mountains. Mobile missile launchers move along rail systems, emerging from the tunnel entrance to launch, then returning to the shelter. Some of these facilities are beyond the GBU-57's 60-meter penetration capability, 200 to 300 meters beneath granite, and Iran may have deepened these tunnels even further following the midnight hammer strike. According to Bloomberg, despite a week of intense bombardment, no significant decrease in the number of Iran's active ballistic missile launchers has been observed, and Iran continues to attack Gulf countries. On March 16th, Saudi Arabia announced it had shut down 60 Iranian drones. A fuel depot near Dubai was struck. Qatar intercepted 2 waves of missile attacks. A maritime drone attack on a tanker 800 kilometers from the strait in Kuwait. The geographical boundaries of the conflict are expanding. Claims are circulating that 3 Kuwaiti Typhoon fighter jets were destroyed at Ali Al Salam Air Base. The US is not managing this war from a safe distance. Its own troops are also at risk. Iran has also begun targeting KC-135 tanker aircraft. According to QWA's analysis, 5 tankers were damaged at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, a blow that directly impacts U.S. aerial refueling capabilities. Without tankers, aircraft range is reduced, sortie numbers drop, and the pace of operations slows. This is precisely what Iran is aiming for, striking at the U.S. logistical backbone. Finding mobile launchers hidden across 1.6 million square kilometers is like looking for a needle in a haystack. Hegseth says, thoughtful missile volume has dropped by 90%, but Iran is still raining missiles down on the entire Gulf. This contradiction is significant. Once Iran's ammunition runs out, the launchers may fall silent, but if they can replenish it, they'll continue. The goal of the second phase is precisely to eliminate this production capacity. Despite this massive power, the US faces serious challenges. And ignoring them is not analysis, it's propaganda. Isolation. Japan, Australia, the UK and France refused to join the Hormuz coalition. Spain closed the Rota and Meron bases. NATO stated, "This is not our war." The US is conducting this operation largely on its own, with limited support from Israel and Saudi Arabia. And the Gulf states had already restricted US access to their airspace and bases before the war, out of fear of Iranian retaliation. The Pacific Gap, having 41% of the Navy in the Middle East, means leaving the door open to China in the Pacific. The Pentagon's worst-case scenario. What if China intervenes in Taiwan, while the US is tied up in a war with Iran? This strategic tension is the key factor determining how long the operation can be sustained. The Ford's endurance. An 11-month deployment, unseen since Vietnam. The crew is exhausted. When Bush arrives, the Ford could be pulled back for rest, but capacity drops during the transition, and Bush's deployment to the region will take another 10 to 12 days. Ammo depth. GBU-57 stocks are critical. The B-2 fleet is small. Tomahawks aren't unlimited. Each costs roughly $2 million. The US is trying to reduce costs by switching to cheaper JDAMs, but this is only possible because air defenses have collapsed. If Iran can rebuild its air defenses, which Russia or China could help with, the equation changes. And Iran's geography. 1.6 million square kilometers, the Zagros Mountains, deep tunnels. Finding every mobile launcher is nearly impossible. The US can destroy fixed targets, but eliminating moving and hidden targets is far more difficult and far more expensive. The most frequently asked question: will the US launch a ground operation? A large-scale invasion is extremely unlikely. CSIS. The force in the region is sufficient for punitive strikes, but lacks the logistics for ground operations. But limited operations are different. The MEU's arrival in the region is a signal. The Karg Island scenario could be on the table. An isolated island, its defenses largely destroyed. A strategic point through which 90% of Iran's oil exports flow. On March 13th, the island was bombed, but the oil facilities were spared. An MEU conducting an amphibious landing on Karg to secure the island. A surgical move that would completely cut off Iran's oil revenue. Not a full-scale invasion, but strategically devastating. On the other hand, ground forces could help expand options to achieve these objectives, but they also carry significant risks. However, the vast majority of the injuries were minor. The US strategy is clear: attrition bombing. In the second phase, the goal is not to destroy Iran's combat capacity, but its reconstruction capacity. Missile factories, drone production facilities, component supply chains, the IRGC's logistics network, all are targets. Without conducting a ground operation, the goal is to permanently cripple the regime's military capacity through sustained pressure from the air and sea. When Bush takes over, simultaneous operations will begin from 3 directions with 3 aircraft carriers. The Ford may be withdrawn for rest, but Bush will take over. The Karg scenario with the MEU could come to fruition. B-2S will continue to strike deep underground facilities, and opening the Strait of Hormuz, likely the most challenging objective of this war, will require a comprehensive naval and coastal operation. To secure the Strait of Hormuz, Iran's entire coastal defense capability, the missile tunnels, fast boat bases, drone launch points, and radar stations we previously analyzed, must be systematically eliminated. Mines must be cleared. And we've detailed how the US faces serious capacity issues in this regard. And as Iran strikes, it redeploys. This is a war of attrition, but at sea. Israel says at least 3 more weeks. Trump says it will end soon. Iran says we will defend ourselves as long as necessary. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. The US has the power to destroy Iran's conventional capabilities. It has proven this. But it cannot fully eliminate Iran's geography, asymmetric resolve, and underground capabilities. And it's not weapons that determine wars. It's time, resolve, and cost. And who's willing to pay what price? That is what will determine the war's true outcome. Iraq proved this. Afghanistan proved this. Iran, this is the arena where this lesson will be tested once again. So what are your thoughts on this matter? Please share your thoughts in the comments. Please subscribe to our channel and don't forget to turn on notifications. Thank you for choosing us.